Hey up and welcome to another episode of Last Cast. Today you join us on another Murfield water and we're on the Battyford Plainfield section on the Murfield book, like I say. Nice little river this. See, it's the River Calder behind us, nice peg, nice comfortable peg as well, so they're good pegs down here, and there was a match on it yesterday, and section weight down here was probably, you're looking about 10 to 12 pound to win it, I think it was yesterday. So with that in mind, I've come down with, you know, fairly varied approach. Couple of Waggler rods, feeder rod, basically concentrating on one area of the peg and just looking to put a mixed bag together really. As I say, the peg behind us, I've had a good plumb around, and as you can see the flow's on the far banks, that's where we're targeting. The riverbed basically just slopes away into that, and that's where the flow is, so that's where I'm expecting the fish to be. There's a tinge of colour in it, as you can see. The water's not particularly up, but like I say, that's basically why I picked that distance to fish. If there was a bit more flow on it, that'd have come closer in, fish stick floats and stuff like that. But as I say, the flow's out on the far bank, so that's where I'm expecting the better fish to be. So in terms of what we've got set up today, as I say, I've got two Waggler rods and a feeder rod. In terms of what we're going to be feeding, I'm looking at feeding hemp and casters across, and then a bit of ground bait on the feeder. The reason why I've gone down the ground bait route, again, as I said, is because there's a bit of colour in the water. So I'll quickly run through the hardware that we're using today. So on the feeder rod, I've got a standard feeder rig, one that you'll see me use pretty much everywhere. I've got a 12-foot feeder rod with a 1/2 ounce carbon tipping. Again, not a ton of flow, so I can get away with that by keeping plenty of line out the water. The rig's a 25 gram Drennan cage feeder. I'll chop and change the feeders, but that's just enough to hold bottom over there. And then I've got a float stop above the feeder as always to create a bolt effect if I've got a few roach and that in the peg. A short link, a twizzle boom, and then probably about 2.5 foot of 018 fluorocarbon to a size 14 Tubertini series 18 hook, so a decent size hook, looking to fish worm and casters on that. And like I say, that's going to be basically what I'm going to be using for catching the bigger fish in the peg. In terms of what I've got for the Waggler rods, I've got two set up to cover a couple of options. One that's basically geared up for looking for better fish, and one that's for small fish and fishing through the water. So I'll run through the lighter rig first. We'll just get it off the roost. So it's an old 15-foot Matt Match Tech, but a lovely soft hollow tip in it, which is perfect for catching dace and roach through the water. I've gone for a closed face reel on this setup, an Abu 506, mainly because it speeds up the process of getting in and out. So on that I've just got 2.6 pound Bayer pearl on, and then I've got the Waggler set, probably we're talking about 6 foot of depth out there. On this one I've got a Drennan Visi Waggler number 5, which has got a slightly thinner tip. It's a hollow tip, but plenty of visibility in it, and a good bit of buoyancy as well. So like I say, I can drag a little bit of line on the bottom with this if I want. In terms of the shotting down the line, I've just got spread 9s, I've got 3 of them, and then a match link swivel, which is equivalent to a number 9 as well. So like I say, that's fishing through the water. And that's down to an 010 fluorocarbon hook length with a size 18 Kamasan B560. Sort of standard Waggler gear, nice and light, fishing through the water for a bit of everything. On the heavier rig on that line, I've set up a 14-foot Waggler, but a slightly stronger Waggler. This is an old Garbolino model that I've got, with an open face reel and 5 pound Daiwa TDR on that, so plenty more geared up, more looking for chub on this. In terms of the float, I've got a Drennan Visi Wag 1, which is a thicker bristle float. I'll shuffle that out of the way. So as you can see there, it's still an insert Waggler, so plenty of sensitivity, but a good thickness of bristle. It's probably 2.5 mil, something like that. So I can drag a bit more line on the bottom with this. So this is the rig that I've got set, probably 2 inch over depth. The shotting on this, again, I've got number 9s down the line, but I've just paired them. So I've got 2 number 9s, 2 number 9s, and then a match swivel. What I might do, like I say, if small fish are a problem, is I can bring all those down and fish a bulk and one dropper, or even fish just a straight bulk. Again, hook length, I've got about 10-12 inches of 012 fluorocarbon this time, and a size 16 Kamasan B560. So again, slightly geared up, more for fishing sort of double caster, maybe double maggot, trying to catch some bigger fish. So it's, like I say, pretty simple setup. 2 Waggler rods, a feeder, and just basically chucking towards that far bank. In terms of the bait that I've got a good two and a half pints of hemp, a couple of pints of casters. I've got some dead maggots to put through the feeder, a few lives and some dendrobinas. The live maggots I'll probably steer away from and just look to use those on the hook. Like I say, the main feed is going to be hemp and casters on the Waggler, and then on the feeder, a bit of chopped worm, some dead maggots and maybe a bit of hemp, looking for a better fish or two. So with that said, we'll say the peg's behind us, so we'll get turned around now and get feeding and start fishing. Right, so we're ready to start fishing now. I've just loaded the feeder full of chopped worm, a few casters and plenty of dead maggots. The mix that I'm using on that's equal parts Dynamite Frenzied MC Black and Sensus Magic Black. And I've mixed it up fairly wet just so I can get it down into the flow. Again, you can see I've got a nice long hook length, probably about 2.5 feet, something like that, and I might look to shorten that down if I'm missing bites or perch are a problem. And I'm just starting on three maggots. My thinking there being if I come back with smash maggots, I know that dace are in the peg, and especially if there's a few small ones, that'll change how I feed my Waggler line. I might concentrate more on the hemp seed. So again, just fishing to a clip because there's not that much flow and I don't have to feed out a massive bow. So I forgot to mention with this, I'm fishing braid, but I've got an 8-pound Daewoo sensor shock leader, and again what I like to do is use that shock leader to help me pick up the flow where the Calder's not flowing that much. I think if I fish like a 4-pound line, I won't be able to feed too much of a bow into the peg, but for me that's a good compromise. So the braid gives me the bite detection, but with the 8-pound shocker it's a bit more resilient to snags, and it also picks up the flow. So now the feeder's set, I'm going to start feeding my hemp and casters across. Again, the Wagglers that I've set up are both 2 gram floats, so I can get right across the river if I need to, and it'll make it nice and easy for me to get past my feed area. So I'm going to start off by putting quite a bit of hemp and caster in to create a nice big area out there to fish around. So as I said in the intro, basically I'm looking to just search that one area of the peg across into the flow where I expect the better fish to be sat. So I'm probably going to give it about 5 good pouchfuls of hemp and 3 of casters as well, just to create that feed area. And again, I'm not looking to spend a ton of time on the tip here. It's mainly looking for bonus fish when I get a chance. So like I say, it'll give me the option of resting my Waggler line and concentrating on feeding it. So while I'm doing that, it just gives me the chance of snaring a bonus fish. So on the feeder, I'll probably chuck every 5 or 10 minutes, just trying to get a bit of feed going down through the peg. Again, because I haven't had any rattles on the tippers yet, I'm thinking that there's not going to be a ton of small fish out there. So that means I can be a bit more aggressive feeding the casters. I'll say if small dace are a real problem, then that's when I'd look to cut out the casters to some extent and just concentrate on feeding the hemp. So now that we've created a decent feed area of hemp and casters, I'm just going to cut down the regularity of the feed and concentrate on fishing the tip for a short while, so hopefully it won't be long before we start getting into 1 or 2. Right, so we're into our first fish now. This is on the 5th chuck. Couple of little rattles on the tip, not sure what it is, but it's only a small fish. It's a good sign, so at least we're off the mark. Nice stamp roach. So again, bit overgunned for the size of these, but a size 14 hook and 18 hook length. The fish aren't too line shy. That's obviously been hit by a pike at some point. It's got a couple of marks on it, but at least we're off the mark now. So that's first fish. We've got him in the net, so we'll get back out there and try for another. So I'm going to go down the same route again. Two red maggots and a fluoro, and then the same mix through the feeder. Plenty of chopped worm, plenty of dead maggots, and a few casters. So again, that's probably taken us about 15 minutes to get our first fish. Like I say, in that time I've had 5 casts, so you can tell I'm already casting on quite a short time frame. Like I say, that's just to try and get the peg going. So I'm getting hit in the clip, feeling the feeder down, and I can just get a couple of turns on the reel just in case we hook a big fish. Just to take a bit of that slack line up and then let the shock leader pick up the flow and create that bow in the line back to the tip. Again, with that stop I've set it about an inch away from the shot which created the boom. So the fish has only got about an inch or so before it moves and it feels the way to the feeder and hooks itself, and that's what happened there. As I could see the tip rattling, so I knew the fish was already hooked. Again, with bigger fish I'd expect them to dislodge the feeder and get a nice positive drop back bite. Right, so we've given it a good hour on the tip there, and that's given me plenty of time to loose feed my Waggler line. I've only had that one roach. I've had another little indication on worm, but it might be the case that later on in the session we go back to the feeder and that's where we catch the bigger fish, but we'll see if that plays out. Like I say, the main thing is it's given me a good chance to feed the Waggler line. So I've put plenty of hemp and caster in over the past hour, feeding nice and regular because I've had my hands free since I've been fishing on the tip. So we'll go for the first chuck on the Waggler. I'm going to start off on double maggot, a red and a fluoro, and hopefully we should get into a few fish. Just drop that in and there's minnows under my feet. So that's what the perch will have been hitting. So pop him back, no point putting him in the net. So we'll get the Waggler out. It's a nice gentle cast. Starting fishing pretty much the near side of the flow to start with, where the bulk of the feed's landed. But with these 2 gram Wagglers I can chuck right across pretty much past the feed area. So it gives me a good chance to fish in and around, so I can hopefully pick fish off all the way through the peg. That Waggler's just tripping bottom there. As I said, with these slightly thicker inserts, it just keeps the bait trickling along the bottom without dragging the float right under. And there was a bite at the bottom end of the run. So as always we're fishing on rivers, I've picked a far bank marker that I'm fishing to. I've pretty much plumbed around an area that I think will be the main sort of kill area, if you like, where I can see my float perfectly and the depth's nice and even. So that float now is just getting into the area where I had that last bite, and there was another indication there. There's a few fish there. And checking my bait every time I come back just in case there's dace in the peg. So it'll just be a case of searching around the feed area now and seeing where the fish are holed up. So now that I've started fishing the line, there's a bite and a fish now. I've cut down the feed a little bit to probably about 15 or 20 casters and about the same of hemp. There we go, that's a lovely stamp roach. And we'll just net this one. So there we go, lovely stamp fish that, and those are what we're after on this line. Hooked perfectly in the top lip. Same again, I'm going to go back in with double maggot if that's the stamper roach that are in the peg. Don't think there's any point in slimming down the size of hook bait. There we go, that's another fish on. So again, as soon as the float's going, I'm just following it up with the feed. Another nice stamp roach. So if we catch at this rate, then I'm sure we'll build a nice weight. Fish between sort of 2 and 3 ounce. That's what we're after on this setup. Again, I've always got the option still of changing to that heavier rig and trying to search for some better quality fish in the peg. So in casting the float out, checking the line, then feeding my hemp and my casters over the top of it. And as soon as the casters and hemp have gone in, I'm just checking the line to make sure I've got a nice tight line to the float, so I'm nice and quick on them. Again, that's the big advantage as well of having longer rods like this 15 foot and the 14 footer I've got set on the other rig. His line pickup's much faster. So it just smooths out the process rather than trying to fish with like a 12 foot Waggler or shorter. Just dragging bottom there, but because that cast I've gone slightly past my feed area, I can just check the float up and let it run again, so it's now sat pretty much in the feed. So what I might look to do with this, because it's just catching bottom a little bit, as I said, I've got it set probably half an inch to an inch over, is I might take that half inch off or so, and certainly if roach are prevalent in the peg, that'll allow me to run the float pretty much at them at full pace of the river. There we go, that's another fish on. Feels like a slightly better stamp this, not sure what it is. So if recent videos have taught me anything, I'm not particularly great at guessing what fish I've caught, so looks like a nice stamp roach. And that's a lovely stamp fish. See, the River Calder's in impeccable form at the moment, and fish like that, quality roach. See, it looks like they've barely seen a hook before. Lovely stamp fish. And that one was pretty much bang in the middle of where the feed's been going in. So I think if there's a few fish like that about, it won't be long before I have a look on the more positive Waggler rig and see if that sorts them out a bit better. Same again, pouch vent, pouch casters, then just checking the line so the float's running through just slightly ahead of the feed. There we go, another fish on. Again, I think this is the virtue, despite not catching a ton of fish in the first hour fishing the feeder, by giving it an hour of consistent feeding, just allows the fish to shoal up and get their confidence. I'm just about able to swing this one. Another lovely stamp roach. Again, another 3-4 ounces, that one. So in the next couple of chucks I might well try caster, or probably double caster actually on the hook. So again, when you're fishing like this, it's really important to have a nice rhythm, which is why I'm casting out, feeding my casters first, so they sink a bit slower, and I'm feeding those slightly further upstream than my hemp. Feeding my hemp down by about sort of 2-3 feet from, or 2-3 yards from where the casters are landing. Then I'm just able to check the Waggler up and drag it back into the feed as it goes down the peg. Just missed that bite. Same again, because there's a few fish in the peg, as you can see, I'm in and out all the time, and that's why it's really important to have that mini match swivel on there as well, especially fishing baits like double maggot. Just prevents the spin up of the bait. Right, so now it looks like we've got a few roach lined up on this Waggler line, and I'm getting a bite most chucks now. Just missed one there. So to try and put a few more fish on the hook, what I'm trying to do is cut down my feed. So instead of feeding casters and then hemp every run through, I'm just switching to feeding casters on one run through and hemp on the other, so I'm just halving the feed down. My thinking being that because we've got a few fish there, I want to try and put a few more on the hook. So that's on that last chuck I put about 15 casters out. This time I'm putting about 20 grains of hemp and just seeing if that puts a few more fish on the hook. And I've also had a couple of little indications. There's another fish on. I've had a couple of little indications pretty much straight after the float settled as well, so I expect there might be the odd small dace out there. It's one of the slightly smaller roach that we've had. But again, when you're getting bites like this, you can quite quickly figure out pretty much where the fish are shoaled up. And then it's just a case of figuring out which rig's best to catch the better stamp fish on and which is most efficient. Same again, just putting double maggot on the hook. Nice positive cast out across the river. And a few casters over the top of this one. And then just checking the line so the float's running bang through the middle of the feed. And I'm quite happy that I went down the route of putting number 9 shot down the line rather than 10s. So like I say, I'm getting the odd little indications the float's gone in, just telling me that there's the odd little dace that's picking up the hook bait. So again, I just had one then when I cast in. So again, if those dace become a problem, then I can always go on to my more positive rig and even move down to bulking the shot to get the bait right down. But this seems to be a good compromise at the moment. So I'm just checking the bait every time I come back in. And then just feeding it over the top again. There we go, that's what I was on about, a little indication pretty much as the bait's settling. So I've just had one of the maggots nipped there. If it was a case of both were bust, and I thought the roach might have come up in the water again, I can always shallow this rig down. Going off the stamp of roach that we've had fishing on or around the bottom, this seems to be the best way of getting down to them. Bit of a poor cast that time. The same again there, the float's gone immediately. So I think I'll give it probably another 10 or 15 minutes on this rig and see if I keep getting those daft bites as the float's going in, and then I might well switch to the slightly heavier setup. On this cast I've just gone a bit further across the river, so just getting the float past the feed area. So again, the last couple of casts I've basically cast straight into the feed. But by casting past it, if the small fish are coming and taking the feed as it's landing in the river, then by casting the float past and letting the shots get down and get the bait down, then dragging the float back in, that's another way of pretty much bypassing those small fish that are attacking there's another bite there, that are attacking the bait as soon as it lands. Same again there, just casting past the feed area. I've not had any daft indications on the drop. I can just feed and then drag the float back into the feed area. That's another bite there that we've just missed. So like I say, I think we'll crack on with this. See if we can put a few more roach in the net, and then like I say, I don't think it'll be long before we switch to that slightly heavier setup and try and get some better quality ones. Right, so we've just switched onto the heavier rig now. I've just took my first fish on it. It looks to be a slightly better stamp roach, this again. I've just started off on this one with 2 maggots on the hook. Just see if it's the rig that makes any difference. In fact, actually, I've guessed it wrong. That's a nice little, well, a very good stamp dace, in fact. So again, that's actually a really good size for the Calder, is that one. I'll say just taking him on two maggots, a red and a fluoro. So lovely stamp fish. So we'll get him in the net. So same again, I'll go back out there with double maggot on the hook. Again, I've not changed anything with the feed. I'm still feeding pretty much alternate on each cast, like I said earlier, about one cast going with hemp, the next on casters. Just to try and cut the feed down a little bit. And that bite, in fact, was pretty much bang in the middle of the feed area. So again, I'm just casting slightly past and then introducing my loose feed and just drawing the float back into it as it lands. So with this float, as I say, like it's got a slightly thicker bristle, I'm able to drag a bit more line on the bottom. So with this, I've got it, that was another bite and another fish on. I'm able to drag probably an inch or so of line on the bottom, so it just slows the hook bait down as it's travelling through the peg, and occasionally that can sort out some better stamp fish. Again, another nice stamp roach. So the next thing I might well do on this rig is I'll switch to double caster. Again, we had a couple of fish on the single and double caster on the lighter rig. So it'll be interesting to see, like I say, if I can sort out a better stamp of fish or whether the stamp remains the same. So again, because I put casters out on that last feed, I'm just going to put the hemp seed out this time, draw the float back into it, and I've got a fish on straight away. And I think if anything that might have taken it just off bottom. Another nice stamp roach. So possibly with the more positive droppers, I'm able to see the bites a bit clearer on this rig, because I haven't missed a bite as yet on it. Like I said, I've had probably 2 or 3 fish on it now, certainly 2 on camera, maybe a third before we put the camera on. And I was getting the odd missed bite on the lighter rig. The other thing I'm conscious of again is if bites tail off, just missed a bite there, funnily enough. If bites do tail off and I want to concentrate on feeding the peg more consistently and giving it a bit of a rest, then I can always go back to that feeder rig I've got set up. And because I've got loose feed going in the general area, casting the feeder pretty much right to the very back of the feed, that might well give me the chance of hooking a better fish or 2. There we go, that's another one on now. Probably the smallest roach of the day so far, that one. Just swinging to hand. So I think on the next cast we'll switch to double caster on the hook and see if that gets us a better fish. Right, so we're getting into the last 5 or 10 minutes of the session now. As you can see, we're still on the Waggler with the positive setup, but I've had to change a couple of things around while I've been fishing in terms of the feeding patterns, and I've also picked up the lighter rig a couple of times just to fish a single caster when the fish have gone a bit funny. I've also had a couple of quick chucks on the feeder, same as we said earlier, so it's allowed me to concentrate on feeding the peg. And that's brought the fish back in, and that's when we've had a few good runs of roach. I mean, on the feed we've only caught 1 roach and 2 perch on that. But like I say, it's given us a good chance to keep feeding the Waggler line. There's another bite that I've just missed. And like I say, try and get the fish lined up a bit. I've also chopped and changed around with the feeding in terms of how much casters and hemp I've put in. And as the session's gone on, I've started to put in a bit more caster and feed a bit more positively, just trying to push the peg a little bit. There's another bite. And like I say, it's been a case of chopping and changing. I've also played around with hook baits a little bit, tried double caster for a few, had a couple of fish on that. Then like I say, that'll have gone quiet, and so I've had to switch back to maggots. But it's been an interesting session. Like I say, I've had to keep changing things around to keep the fish coming. But we've caught a really nice stamper roach today. Had 1 decent dace, and like I say, those 2 perch on the feeder. Missed another bite there. As as you can see, because I've got quite a big feed area, I can strike at the first bite off the back of the feed and then let the float run through on the near side or in the middle of the feed as well. So that sort of helps us pick off fish in and around the peg. But it's looking like they've gone a bit finicky again. But like I say, we've only got 5 minutes left, so I'll try and catch 1 or 2 more fish and then call it a day at that. So we've fed a good pint and a half of castor today, probably a pint and a half of hemp as well. There's another fish on now. Like I said, we've put a really nice net of fish together. Only 3 fish other than roach. It's been a really nice day's sport for the sake of sort of 4 hours fishing. So I think what we'll do is we'll pop this one in the net, nice little stamp roach to finish on, and we'll have a look at what we've caught. Right, so as you can see, that's our final net of fish there. A lovely net of roach, a couple of nice stamped dace and a couple of perch as well. Pretty much all caught on the Waggler today, mixing between casters and maggots on the hook, just feeding hemp and castor, and it's been a cracking little session. We've had to keep a few changes coming, like I say, switching between the light rig and the heavier rig, fishing more positively at times when they were having it, and dropping down to the lighter rig, even to single caster at times, just to pick off the odd fish. But there's some lovely stamp roach in there. As you can see, the quality of the fish in the Calder these days, you know, even with dace that sort of size, it's incredible really. So what we'll do now is get them popped back, and as always from Last Cast, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you on that next video.